Welcome back to the Ever-Changing World podcast. I'm your host, Ava Zanetti, and today's episode is going to be on Moore's Law. This is something that I have heard about for a few years now, actually. Not sure how long I've known the term, but I've heard of the term for sure for a little bit. And I never really did a ton of research until recent years. And that wasn't really, the main reason that was because this has been in the news a lot for almost a threat. So this is a kind of more of a computational episode per se. Moore's Law does relate to chips inside computers and the rate that is accelerating. So how well they can be developed. And this law is actually very interesting, and I'm going to see how long I can talk about this law for, because, usually you can't talk about a theory or a law for very, very long, definitely not an hour, but, I think it will be very interesting to talk about this, to get an idea about what Moore's Law really is, and what the effects of it are. So really the main points I want to cover today, of course, is what is Moore's Law, who created Moore's Law, why is it important? What are the implications of Moore's Law? What will happen if it ends? Kind of the mitigation. I don't know if I found much for that, but we'll see as we go along in the episode, as well as the future. This episode, I really don't... Oh, I do remember, actually. Usually I have a really good grasp of what I will do every week for a podcast episode. And, I've done crypto and tech for the last few episodes, and I thought it'd be good to take a break. And I didn't really have any books that I wanted to talk about, because I haven't read anything too crazy. Not as crazy as The Alchemist. And not crazy in a bad way, I probably phrased that wrong. I mean, I haven't really read anything as impactful as The Alchemist. I probably have, but I haven't really thought of anything that I could do that for yet. So I decided I should just go into Forbes. That's actually where I went. And I thought, okay, let's look at some of the newest news and see what we could talk about for the week. And then I found Moore's Law, and I think I have the article right here, and I'll mention it before we begin. So it's DARPA, DARPA, aims to keep Moore's Law going. Here's how. So this is the article that I actually found. And I was like, you know what? Maybe let's see if we can make a podcast episode about this. I think this is quite interesting. And it is kind of something random. I mean, I do like computers, obviously. I use it all the time. And I'm in a computer science class right now. So, I do enjoy it. But it's not an area that I would particularly see myself having a profession in. Really heavily working with computers in that way. And understanding the inner workings of computers. So, I just found this episode idea to be really interesting and something that I definitely would not think about doing before. I thought that would be really good. Today's episode you won't need any background information on. Of course, I always recommend listening to past episodes. Today is our 7th episode on the podcast, which is super exciting. I just realized, I think it was last week, and I don't think I mentioned in the podcast, but I realized that we've been going for almost 2 months. Actually, next week it'll be 2 months that we've been recording this for, and I totally forgot to mark the month, our 1 month recording episode, but we don't need to do that, of course. But I think it's really exciting that I've kept up with this for almost 2 months now. I remember, it still feels like yesterday when I started recording this, doing my first ever podcast episode. Honestly, I've enjoyed it so much. I'm so glad all of you have tagged along for the ride. Honestly, it is such a fun thing that I love to do every week. I look forward to it every week. And honestly, I almost thought today was Tuesday, so I was so happy when I found out I get to record a podcast episode tonight and be able to speak to you guys. So of course, once again, always leave your recommendations down below. DM me on Instagram, DM me on Twitter. I link the socials in the bio, so you can always just go click on that and follow me on there and request episodes, because I do have a lot of ideas right now, but of course, eventually there will be that point where I don't have a lot of podcast episode ideas. So I would really love if you guys had some great ideas in general, and I can definitely speak about those. And I'm also looking to add a new segment. So if you guys would be interested in something like that, let me know. It would be more, maybe I'll hint it in this episode, actually. Might not be the target demographic hinting this episode, but, might as well. I do this podcast for me. I was thinking of doing another segment, something a little bit more based on kind of issues in society, instead of just talking about cool things that I like researching. Doing something related to that. I'm not going to give it away right now because I'm not sure if I'm going to do it, but keep that in mind if you ever want to tune in. It'd probably be on Thursday, so we'll see based on my schedule in the next coming weeks, and especially next year when I head to grade 11 and there's a lot more courses. I will definitely not have as much time, but I will definitely keep up with the podcast. So let me know what episodes you'd like. Let me know if you want a new segment. Let me know if you guys have any ideas, because I'm sure with you guys are listening to the podcast, so you've heard me talk. You understand, what I sound like, what I'm probably better at, what I'm worse at. So always give me recommendations. I'm always here for them, and you guys probably have better recommendations and ideas that I can think about for sure. And again, before we start this episode, as I do think this will be a shorter one, always remember you can always go check out the information given. I haven't mentioned this in the last few episodes, I don't believe, and I do want to make note of this. So you probably see it, it's right beside when you click on the episode. It's in the bio. And if you're on Apple, if you're on Spotify, if you're on Acast, it's in the bio. I always link my resources in the bio of the episode that it's in. So I do use resources a lot. I do research a lot because, the topics that I talk about, obviously I'm not a trained professional in any of these areas. I'm in grade 11 math right now. So, I'm not obviously super expertised in any of these areas at all. So that's why I use tons of research. And I use research, of course, from reputable sources, and I do love researching this stuff, so, I always make sure I do my due diligence in researching stuff. So again, definitely always check out the resources. And also, if you just want more information, if you just want to research a little bit more, I think that is always a great idea. And do your own research. As well, always make sure you check the date that the episode is posted on. I really think this is important too, because some of the information that I'm giving might not be the same as the information in, let's say, a year or 5 years, whenever you're listening to this, if anyone is listening to this in 5 years. I think it is super, super important to always make sure that you check on when the episode is uploaded, because, episodes like this, where things might be time sensitive, it's really important to just check. Again, before I begin thinking about that, I believe I did a James Webb Space Telescope episode it was my second episode, actually, that I recorded, and I really wanted to, mention this. Let me see, let me look here, James Webb Space Telescope. Of course, this is always on Instagram. I thought I followed NASA Web. Let me find this in my... One moment, guys. I thought this was very important. There it is. Okay, so, the James Webb Space Telescope has taken its first, quote-unquote, selfie. So we see its primary mirrors in space. It looks so cool. Actually, I'm going to post this on my story right now that I'm thinking about it. Yeah. It made its first selfie, quote-unquote, if you want to call it that. So that was super cool. That was 3 days ago of the time of recording this. And today's February 14th. So, yeah, that is super, super cool. And, we are just getting closer to getting some new, information on Webb. Also, the Webb's near-infrared camera, or NIRCam, can collect light from celestial objects. I'm reading this from Instagram. And starlight, same star, can be reflected of each of Webb's 18 unaligned mirror segments. and I believe it took a picture, and it just looks like a bunch of dots, but I believe it's just kind of configurating in a way. So, that is super, super, super cool. And, yeah, I just think it's awesome that I can also update you guys on really cool, episodes that I did a few weeks ago, and, hopefully you guys are keeping up. If not, you just heard a little bit about the James Webb Space Telescope, and that's always fun. So if you want to listen to that episode, I believe it's the second. And just look at the page. Okay, so now, without further ado, let's get into talking about Moore's Law. I have stalled this enough. I don't know how much information we'll get in this, but let's just go for it. First, of course, I will be talking about what is Moore's Law exactly. So, of course, I am on my favorite website of all time, Investopedia. And let's first obviously start off with what is Moore's Law, because it sounds kind of weird, right? Like, why are we talking about Moore? Why does he have a law? So, basically, this refers to Gordon Moore, his perception of the number of transistors on a microchip, and that this doubles every 2 years, though the cost of computers is halved. So, why don't I look up, let me give a better explanation of microchips and transistors. I think I said that wrong. Okay, so, a microchip, I just want to give a really brief overview of what a microchip is. Okay, so, today, microchips are used in smartphones that allow people to use the internet and have a telephone video conference. They're also used in TVs, GPS tracking, so they're used in everything. Microchips are in everything. I'm sure you know what a microchip is, but just so you know, that's kind of what a microchip is. It's used in every computational device. I think that's the basics that you need to know about it. But the whole idea behind this is that the number of transistors, so these are all the little things that are going inside of the microchip so that it can send information to the rest of your phone. So let's say you even, press a button on your phone, like you slide up to go out of your home screen. There's information being sent there, so a microchip is a part of that process. And that is kind of a part of your computational device. So when I'm talking about a computational device, that can be anything that you could say, quote unquote, is a computer. So a smartphone is basically a computer, right? So maybe not in the way we think of a laptop, but it is a computer in a sense. So that is kind of an overview of what a microchip is, and this is the idea that it doubles every 2 years. So that is very, very quick. And as we know, seeing how many smartphones come out every year, seeing how many new laptops come out every year, technology evolves very, 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 very quickly. For example, my mom in high school, she is in her 40s now. In high school, they were just being introduced to computers, and now I bring a laptop every day to me to school. And, whatever, we're only, 27 years apart in age? So, it was 30 years, basically? Not even, actually. Sorry, a lot less than that. It wasn't that long ago that she graduated from high school, in a sense. In the span of a human life, right? That's not that long ago. But in computer years, that is a lot, right? I believe she graduated... Shoot, I'm gonna think about this for a minute. I believe she graduated in the mid-90s, if I'm doing my math correctly here. I could either be offending her or making her feel good about her age right now. I think because she was born, so I think she had to have been. Yeah, it was the mid-90s when she graduated from high school. So, realistically, that's not that long ago. What? That's 30 years ago, so that's not that long ago in terms of human history. 30 years, it's a lot of time for our lifespans, right? We only live, to 80, but in terms of computational lifespan, that is crazy, because the amount of technology that they had then compared to now, it would be crazy. If you sent someone from the 90s, or even let's use the 80s, because that can be maybe a better stark example, to the 2020s, they would be amazed by the technology that we have. So, this stuff goes quickly and it adapts quickly. But, there's always a but, and that's why I'm talking about this, because there is a but. There is kind of now the issue with this Moore's Law. But first, we gotta give you background information. So, the other idea here, of course, is that the cost of computers, sorry about that, I got an email. The cost of computers is halved. So, let me quote this from Fpga. Moore's Law states that we can expect the speed and capability of our computers to increase every couple of years, and we will pay less for them. Another tenet of Moore's Law asserts that this growth is exponential. So it just keeps growing and growing and growing and growing, right? So, I mean, this, again, I'm going to use an example of, let's say 30 years ago, computers were crazy about money. And they were also huge, right? You have to imagine how big these computers were. If you can think of a really old TV, like from the 50s, that was basically the size of the monitor on these really old computers. So, these computers were huge, they were expensive. No one was buying it for their house unless, one, they were wealthy, and even at that point, it was quite useless at the time. Or two, it was used for a company. So, computers were huge and expensive. And now I'm carrying a sleek, small laptop for a little over $1,000, and that's, not that expensive compared to how much they were. So, this, of course, has been proven to be true. So, I do want to mention, who is more then, right? Because you can say, oh yeah, great, he made this law, but who is this guy? Why is he important, and why should we listen to him about this law if we don't even know who he is? Like, how can we trust this man to make a law like this, right? Even though it's been proven now, how can we trust a man like this? Okay, well, Gordon E. Moore was the co-founder, of Intel. And, of course, he made the observation Moore's Law. And this was in 1965, so that's a very long time ago. And I can also mention this, too. So, another part of Moore's Law states that the growth of microprocessors is exponential. So, microchips, microprocessors, all of that good stuff that make a computer. So, he co-founded Intel, and of course, now we know Intel to be a very, very big company, and he postulated that the number of transistors that can be packed into a given unit of space will double about every 2 years. So, he did not actually call this Moore's Law, or he didn't really make an idea to make a law. He just, made an observation. He was just like, oh yeah, it's just gonna double every 2 years. That's just logic. But it became a law, and, so what it says here is he actually just made a statement. Sorry about that, guys. He just made a statement, based on kind of the emerging trends, while he was at Intel, right? As they were manufacturing, he just noticed these trends within his own company, and he's like, okay, yeah, this makes sense. This is just going to double every 2 years. And of course, now this kind of became a prediction, and of course, now we know it as Moore's Law. So, here it also states in Investopedia, in the decades that followed Gordon Moore's original observation, Moore's Law guided the semiconductor industry and long-term planning and setting targets for research and development, R&D. Moore's Law has been a driving force of technological and social change, productivity, economic growth, etc., etc. So, Moore's Law has really been a big part of our lives. I mean, we've seen it happen right before our eyes. And if you don't know if it's Moore's Law happening, it probably is, especially if it relates to computers. This exponential growth in these microchips, in these microprocessors, is an evident thing, especially nowadays when we see how quick everything goes. I mean, I was just talking about the metaverse in the last episode, and there's been so many new developments in metaverse, even though it's kind of just erupted. So, these things go quick, and I think, it is super, super interesting. Okay, here's a little footnote here, and maybe I'll just quickly read over it to see if I even need to read this. Yeah, sure, I'll read it. So a little important note here is that Moore's law implies that computers, machines that run on computers, and computing power all become smaller, faster, and cheaper with time as transistors on integrated circuits become more efficient. So that's kind of a little footnote to kind of understand what that is. So here we're going to look a little bit at the, I guess, kind of the benefits of Moore's law. I'm kind of reading a little bit off the script here in the order we're doing stuff, but this article is really, really good. And obviously, I could never, ever pass up a Investopedia article. If you've ever listened to the podcast, you know I love Investopedia. They have the best articles ever. Okay, let me get into it. So basically, this part of the article is saying, after more than 50 years, we still use this law, and we can see this in many ways. In computing, we've seen these transistors with integrating circuits becoming more efficient. They're smaller and faster. Everything is becoming smaller and faster and cheaper. Smaller, faster, cheaper. Those are kind of the three things you need to know. Chips and transistors are becoming microscopic structures that contain... This actually just told us what chips and transistors are. So I'll read this out loud for you guys just to make sure you understand it. Chips and transistors are microscopic structures that contain carbon and silicon molecules, which are aligned perfectly to move electricity along the circuit faster. The faster a microchip processes electrical signals, the more efficient a computer becomes. The cost of higher-powered computers has been dropping annually, partly because of lower labor costs and reduced semiconductor prices. So really it's just saying, Moore's law is correct. This is getting cheaper. This is getting faster. And we are seeing this more in our world every day. Or really every 2 years, in a sense. Oh, I just spilled some water. Sorry about that, guys. Everything is okay. I do not need to worry about this right now. Okay. Anyhow, get back to Moore's law. So, that idea right there, right, it is really all about the microchips and the efficiency becoming better and better and better and better. That's the trend we're going to see talking about Moore's law. That's something we're going to talk about when we're talking about Moore's law. That's really the main idea behind it. And really the main idea you want to get behind Moore's law in general, understanding Moore's law, is that everything gets faster, smaller, better. Faster, smaller, better. Okay, next part is in electronics. We see, again, I mentioned this, everything's getting better, everything's getting faster. We've seen this with smartphones, we've seen this with computer tablets, and these would not work without tiny processors. Remember this. So if we didn't have Moore's law, if we weren't developing at this space, we wouldn't have smartphones. You wouldn't have your phone, you wouldn't have your tablet, which would be very sad, of course. So these things are super important. And also it mentions that neither would video game spreadsheets, accurate weather forecasts, and GPS. So without Moore's law, and without these chips becoming better and better and better and better and smaller and smaller and smaller, we would have none of the things that we know and love today. I just looked at my Apple Watch and I said, you know what? I'd never have this, and that would be a sad day for me. So, Moore's law is super important. But the reason why I talk about this, because, of course, well, great, Moore's law is here. We know about it. That was great, Ava. Okay, the podcast can be done. But no, of course, I had more content than just that, because Moore's law is seeming to come to an end. Yes, that is correct. Moore's law is coming to an end. But why is it coming to an end? Because you'd think, okay, well, everything's getting smaller, everything's getting faster, everything is becoming cheaper. Isn't that great for everybody? Isn't this benefiting all of humanity? Well, of course, we don't want Moore's law to stop, right? We don't want this exponential growth to just abruptly stop. But it is. So, here is a little passage, and I believe this was written in 2020, so we will keep that in mind. So, here's a little passage from Investopedia again. And it basically says, according to expert opinion, Moore's law is estimated to end sometime in the 2020s. As I am recording this podcast episode, it is 2022 for reference, so keep that in mind. We are at the beginning, pretty much, so this decade. Okay, what this means is that computers are projected to reach their limits. Okay, second, sorry. Oops. Because transistors will be unavailable. Okay, I'll reread that. Reread that. Because transistors will be unable to operate within smaller circuits at increasingly higher temperatures. This is due to the fact that cooling the transistors will require more energy than the energy that passes through the transistor itself. That is a mouthful. So basically, putting it in layman's terms, it just can't get any better anymore. We have gotten to the point where the exponential growth of these chips is stopping because we've gotten too good. That is kind of a little bit of ironic, because the whole point of Moore's Law, the whole point of getting better is to keep going and going and going and to be the best, and keep improving, but we can't really do that. So this whole idea right here is that, we're going to reach our limits. And the real reason why is because all these really, really tiny circuits, they get really hot, right? If you've ever touched your computer, and I'm touching my computer right now, and it is very warm, especially if you run a lot of applications. If you feel your computer, and if you feel it close to kind of where it flips, right, like before your keyboard begins, you can feel like that's really, really, really hot. And sometimes it can get burned to the touch. I'm sure people have gotten burned from how hot it is. Maybe not actually, because there is a protective seal. But I'm sure that people have gotten close. It gets really hot. And these little circuits, right? Because you think, okay, great, they do all their little circuit stuff. Great, we don't need to worry about it. Well, no. It all, energy cannot be created nor destroyed. So if we're moving all these little parts together and these circuits are doing what they do, it'll just keep doing that, and it needs to emit something, right? Like it's excreting that energy, but there's going to be a byproduct, and that byproduct is heat. So it's getting hotter and hotter and hotter and hotter and hotter, and we do have a cooling process. But cooling these transistors will actually require more energy, so it'll be more energy than the energy that passes through the transistor itself. So it'll actually go backwards in a sense, because it'll be worthless, because now the transistors are just gonna cost way more energy than we could have had like a second before. So it is basically going to reverse. Okay, well, great. Moore's Law is reversing, Moore's Law is stopping, great. Well, how does that affect me? How does that affect anything in my life? Okay, well, let's get into that. Let me find a good article here. I have a few how they're keeping Moore's Law alive, which I really think is cool. Okay, here, let's go to Brain Inspire. End of Moore's Law. What's for the future of computing? This is what's made in 2019, but we're just going to go with it. So, the end of Moore's Law and what happens next. Okay, so basically it's saying, IT has really transformed our daily operations. Of course, we use tech every single day of our lives, practically. Most people do. And it also says, small enterprises and large enterprises over the past 50 years. So, IT tech has really, really taken effect in the last 50 years. So the completion of daily workflows to transfer tasks, utilization of common tech activities, computers really change the way we have evolved as a species, which is very, very true. So, like every facet of society has a computer, right? So we use this all the time. So, even, it also mentions here that, even mobile phones fit in the category of a computer, which is quite crazy. And really, the definition of a computer here I do want to mention is that it's any electronic, technological device that stores data and utilizes a processor for computing data, such data operations, in order to output a defined constant result, often utilizing binary code. So, a lot of things can be classified as a computer, and that's very interesting to me. So, it doesn't just have to be like a Mac, Intel, Microsoft laptop. No, it can be really any kind of technological device that does something. So, that gives us an output for our input. So that is a super important kind of concept to understand about a computer, because we will be mentioning computers a lot, and sometimes it doesn't just mean our laptops, though most of the time when we are talking about it, it does kind of just mean our laptops. Okay, let me see. So, what is our next part here about? I want to kind of skip past a lot of these. I know I've been jumping around in this episode, but I just find it so interesting because I really honestly didn't think I could talk about this for very long, but obviously I do go on my little rants here, so I definitely can. But my big ideas here that I want to talk about is why is it coming to an end? Well, sorry, not why, but when has it already come to an end? And there's kind of some conflicting ideas here. To be quite honest, I don't really love this article, so I'm going to skip past it right now. And I'm going to kind of try and find a better article to kind of... Oh, I copied the same article twice. Maybe I really did like the article. Okay, so let's go to builtin.com. It says Moore's Law is dead. Oh my goodness. That is concerning, so now what? Everyone's saying it's... So this is basically saying, it's officially dead. So, okay, so at first, actually, it was said it would be 18 months, but now it's 2 years. Okay, let me go through this quickly. Let's see here. So, a little bit here, they're talking about the CPU, Central Processing Unit. All you really need to know is that this is a law that's coming to an end. So, here, this is actually a really good part. Let's talk about the threats first. So, this little title, this little subheading is Atom Scale and Skyrocketing Costs. The speed of light is finite, constant, and provides a natural limitation on the number of computations a single transistor can process. So, it is funny because a lot of the times, obviously as humans, we will never be able to go as fast as the speed of light ourselves, right? Really, anything that we create will never really be able to get to that speed. They may get close, but probably not to that speed. So, for us, it's like, the fastest we might ever have been on is an airplane. And that's quite fast to us. But the speed of light is actually very, very, very fast. But in terms of computing, I mean, you can't change laws, right? You can't change physical reality. And we can't make these things any faster anymore. Because the speed of light, even though it is very quick and it is kind of crazy fast, it is finite, and that is a fact. And a lot of things in life are quite finite. So, really everything is. So, we can't pass information faster than the speed of light. And, you could say, okay, well, maybe we don't need to pass it that fast, right? How fast could it go? Well, it goes very, 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 very fast. I really think you need to understand that computers work really fast. I mean, if you've ever looked at Google and you saw it took 0.02 seconds to get, 50 million search results for your answer, it's quite crazy. Like, let me just look up something simple. I'm going to do this little test right here. I'm going to look up dogs on my computer. And it said in 0.71 seconds, there was, let's see how many zeros there are here, 3.88 billion results for dogs. That is insane how fast that it computes, right? And of course, that's not all computing on our computer. There's a central processor somewhere doing that, but it's very fast. And it's still not fast enough for the amount that we have. So all these kind of transistors, it's just becoming to a point where now it will be pointless, right? It's getting so hot that the cooling systems is going to require more energy than our transistor itself. So that is really the big point on that. So, well, what does this mean now? You know what? Like, we can't make anything faster, but we want faster things. We need faster things. What are we going to do? Well, there is something beautiful called quantum computing. And this is where my little next part goes into. I might do a full episode on this one day, probably far in the future, but anyhow, let's just go into it. So quantum computing is kind of a new kind of conversation that seems is going to be important. What this is quantum computers are based on qubits. So Q-U-B-I-T-S, qubits. And they use quantum effects like superposition and entanglement to their benefit. So these are kind of complicated physics concepts that obviously I'm not going to go into because I'm obviously, one, not super confident in the area as I'm not a physicist, and two, did not prepare any information on this. So I won't go into superposition and entanglement, and honestly, you don't really need to know this right now. But basically, it uses a bunch of really, really kind of crazy concepts that if you've taken a physics class, you probably have heard of, or maybe forget if you didn't want to remember physics class ever again. But it uses these kind of concepts to these quantum effects for the computer. That's really all you need to know. And obviously, these also overcome the minimization problems of classical computing. So, what it says here in the article is that it's still too early to predict when they will be widely adopted, but these are already interesting examples of their use in business. So we have a little tag here, and I'm going to go into that. So quantum computing is really, really interesting, and I didn't really want to go into this, but it's just so cool. Okay, actually, so I'll link this article in the description as I usually do, and I have a really cool photo here. Obviously, I can't show it to you guys as you are listening, but it's this really cool image of what a quantum computer looks like. It obviously does not look like our laptops. It looks like really a bunch of metal pieces hanging from a ceiling, if you want to think about it that way. All kind of dangling, a bunch of like wires hanging around. It looks kind of crazy. So, obviously, this is talking about Moore's Law. Classical computers have its limitations, and that's kind of coming to an end because of these technological barriers that we have. So what this mentions here is that, on the other hand, computers. I don't know what I'm saying. Sorry to the computer. Computers are operating linearly, processing task after task, and possible parallelization of calculations is limited by the Untitled law. Hopefully I'm pronouncing that right. Taking these two factors together means that approaching really hard real-life problems or simply really big data will need a shift. So, if you've ever heard that this is the era for data. Everybody wants data. I'll probably do a podcast episode on data specifically, but data is a huge, huge conversation right now, especially in kind of the computer processing world. Really in the world in general, because data mining is something that people are doing so often now. The want for data is here. If you've ever really thought about it, let's use a marketer standpoint. If you have the data of everybody, let's just even say, in the world, if you have the data of everybody in the world, you know their age, you know their height, you know their name, you know their interests, you know their algorithms, you can quite literally control the world. You can show things to people, you can get people to buy stuff, you can control the market, you can control the world. So, data is, and that's why there's so many privacy things, right? That's why you stay private on Instagram. That's why you protect your data. And I know a lot of people don't do it. I'm really bad for this. I don't do it either. But it really is a big conversation. So data is huge. And quantum computing is only going to lead us to more of this kind of data mining, people finding out about our data. So if you're on the internet, people are going to find out about you. And let's be honest, they probably already know everything they need to know about you. So anyways, quantum computing is kind of this big idea, and we're not really quite sure how powerful they are. Obviously there's a lot of recent hype about this quantum advantage, and how fast they can do stuff, and how much power they have. It's basically just solve problems better than a normal computer. So, the idea here is that you shouldn't expect your business to be fully optimized because of quantum computers, or at least not right now. Again, a lot of this stuff really is in the beginning stages. I mean, we've looked at the metaverse, we've looked at crypto even. I mean, crypto still is in its beginning stages, depending on what angle you look at it. So you look at this stuff and you see that we are at the beginning stages. So it is really hard to see where it will go, though I do think quantum computing will come into play. I just think on its natural development, right? Because we've had Moore's Law is coming to an end. So now what do? I think we need to move into quantum computing. We need to move into these different ideals. So I won't go into detail on quantum computing right now, as obviously I will probably do that in another episode. But I just thought that was a super interesting little segment that I could do, as I usually do. So that's super interesting. Other things that we can be doing is specialized architecture. So particular algorithms are saying. So GPUs have been already used for AI training over a decade. Google has introduced TPUs, which is tensor processing units, to boost AI. And right now there are over 50 companies manufacturing with AI chips, including just a bunch of different tech companies. Another thing that they're saying we can move from Moore's Law to different types of computing is Fpga. This is field programmable gate arrays. So this is a piece of hardware that can be programmed after the manufacturing process. So these were kind of first introduced in 1985. But these different reprogrammable hardwares can be traced back to the 1960s. So these are another thing that we could probably be using. I mean, all of this, right? It is kind of scary that our technology isn't as advanced as we'd like it to be. But there are going to be options. So now I'm going to kind of move to Quora because I always find something interesting in Quora, and I don't know why. And obviously, take Quora especially at face value. I wouldn't really, live for Quora and everything they say, but they usually have some really interesting people who usually know what they're talking about. So this person, based on their profile, they're a senior software engineer at Novel, or have been at Novel, Airsoft, IBM, Array Networks, Apple, and Google. So, you could say, okay, they really know what they're talking about. So, this Quora thread was kind of about what are the effects of Moore's Law on software and tech and programming and the economy. So, this person kind of says that it probably doesn't end. So, they said, okay, so this is their disclosure, that they contribute to support, get a title of it, and occasionally throw peanuts from the cheap seats. So they're basically saying, like, don't put too much thought into my information, though they do have a really good profile, so we will, like, hear them out. So they kind of explain what Moore's Law is, and they say, you know what? They say, I don't see this as a problem or slowing down. Other people have said, it's done. We're already, the end of Moore's Law has happened. This person is saying, I don't really see a problem. So, what this person is saying is, while it's frequently applied to the idea of a transistor count and feature size, it applies equally well to parallelism. Okay? You know what? I'm just going to say their first name. Their first name is Terry. I don't want to say their last name on the podcast episode because, that's not my place. But the link to their thing will obviously be in the description. And they did put it on the internet, so, they should expect that. Something should come out of it. So I won't mention that, but this person's name is Terry. So this was kind of Terry's idea here. And, so they said, even if the former, and I am reading a lot of this word for word, so I didn't want to mention their name. Anyways, so, they said, even if the former, not the latter, were the rule you were still using to measure, we haven't, been forced off Silicon Valley yet, let alone move to something like thermodynamically reversible computing. So they're using a lot of big words here, and they showed an atomic level sleeve bearing image here, which was pretty cool to look at. And they're talking about a little bit intricacies, and they're really the basis of their argument here is that we have a long way to go, and don't be worried. So this other person, Mel, they are a electrical engineer. So let me see. They said, okay, here they said. They talked a lot, so I would go read this if you really want to read this. But they said, really, in this little point here is they said, my point is that technological development is not continuous. So Dr. Moore shows it as a roughly linear in his graphs. However, with enormous due respect to one of our great geniuses, I would suggest that his law is cynical, i.e., improvement will take place only until it is no longer technically or economically feasible to improve. Then a distribution such as continue to occur and the old technology will replace with a new technology. That is, we should not be talking about Moore's Law, but of course one of Moore's cycles. So really they're saying that, okay, then what will the next Moore cycle be? So they're saying, instead of thinking, okay, whatever, this is the end of computers, well, now there's just a new technology that can arise. So this is actually a positive because, things should end and things should begin and, we should go through this process of something dying out and a new thing coming. We see that with generations. We see that in humans, right? This is something that should be happening. So I thought that argument is actually really interesting, and I think a lot of people are saying, okay, yeah, maybe this particular Moore's law is coming to an end, but a Moore's cycle might be coming. So again, quantum computing or all these other things that are happening might keep it kind of a little bit continuous. Okay, let me find... I believe I had another article here. I actually wanted to talk about... I have so many articles open, which is not good. Okay, let me look. I think I really wanted to talk about Intel and what they're doing. So of course this law was made by Moore, who co-founded Intel. So this is the actual first article I found. It's called DARPA. So this aims to keep Moore's law going. Okay, what does it say? So a lot of people are saying, over the last 6 decades, this kind of have stalled, and Mark Rosker, who is the director of DARPA, sees things very differently. So what he's saying is that he explains how the growth in an interview described by Moore's law has been sustained by waves of innovation from DARPA, and how the next stage, which he calls a fourth wave, will be carried out by forward technologies. So he's basically saying, again, this idea of the Moore's waves, and he's saying now there is going to be a fourth wave. We're at the end, sure, of this wave, but there's going to be a fourth one, of course. And of course, with technology, it might end, but it also adapts and new technologies arrive. So there's this really good graph in the article. I don't really know if I can just link that, but obviously I'll link the article. This one is the Forbes article, and it has this really cool graph, and it shows kind of from 1960 the waves that we have. So there was blue wave, exponential growth kind of ended, and then there was a new one, and it shows the little phasing off piece as well. So this was probably 1963. 65-ish, and it ended early 1990s. That was the first cycle. This one, kind of trailed off at the end of the 1980s. Then the second one started at, kind of like late 1980s and trailed off until the mid-2000s. So, between 2000 and 2010. And then now we're seeing the other green one, which is us. And it is kind of trailing off now. So it's saying, they have this thing called DARPA, which I really want to mention. So there was a really long interview, so I really want to kind of synthesize this information in a really easy way to understand. Okay, let me see. So, DARPA's division keeps pushing for development in electronics, of course. So this is driven by the cutting edge VLSI, so Very Large Scale Integration Project, which has been called one of the most influential research projects in modern computer history. That's a really big say. So, Rosker says this: transistors kept getting smaller and smaller and smaller, and that was good. We went from transistors that were many, many microns to things that were starting to be measured in nanometers. So, he said this worked fine until the transistors were being dwarfed off by other parts of the chip, etc., some technical stuff. So, he said this led to the new back of the line, or BEOL, fabrication approaches involving tiny copper wires disposed and etched on the chip. So, it's kind of getting too complex almost, to the point where it's almost not going to be worth it. So, the essential advance that I think most characterized the third wave was the introduction of FinFET. So, he's kind of talking about the different things that introduced the new waves. And he said, we've seen these waves, right? Like, why is everybody scared? We've seen these waves happen before. We've seen these things happen. And he said, you know what? This DARPA is going to kind of be the next new wave, and it's going to help influence that. So maybe next article might be a little bit helpful. Okay, so this article by Wired, sorry about that. Okay, so this title, which caught my eye, says $150 million machine keeping Moore's law alive. And you see this really cool image of some scientists. Some people are hooked up by kind of like a bungee cord looking thing, and like a safety harness onto the ceiling. They're all in their precaution suits because this thing is very expensive, and it just looks like a huge computer on the ground. So, this is in a clean room, of course. Engineers have begun constructing a critical component for a machine that promises to keep the tech industry as we know it on track for at least another decade. So everyone's kind of trying to keep what we know right now, keep it going for another decade. And I mean, I think really we're kind of at the end point, right? My personal opinion is we're at that end point. We're on that fiending off point. So everyone's kind of really trying to just keep this fiending until we, of course, eventually, get to the end and a new technology arises. Because of course we still need to have computers. We still need to, market things and put things out there and have more technology. So a lot of this people are trying to kind of wean this off for a little bit more. So what this is saying here is that they have introduced, this machine is being built by ASML, which is a Dutch company, and it is going to be the first extreme ultraviolet, or EUV, lithography machine for mass production in 2017. And let me see, they perform a crucial role in the chip-making ecosystem. So they have been used in the manufacture of the latest, most advanced chips, including those in new iPhones, as well as computers for AI, and all of these other super interesting things. So this $150 machine, it contains 100,000 parts, which is crazy, and 2 kilometers of cabling. Oh my gosh. Knowing me, I'd get that knotted up real quick. So shipping the components requires 40 freight containers, 3 cargo planes, and 20 trucks. This thing is massive. This thing is insane. This is crazy. So only a few companies can afford the machines, of course, because they are insanely expensive, and most of them go to the world's biggest 3 chip makers, which is obviously important because these are the ones that are kind of making the things that need them the most. So everyone's saying obviously this is a really incredible machine. A professor at MIT also mentioned this, and they're saying this person said it's an absolutely revolutionary product breakthrough that is going to give a lease of life to the industry for years. So this huge kind of aluminum thing is kind of insane. And this article is really long, so I won't go into too much detail here. But a lot of people, of course, are saying it's an absolutely kind of revolutionary product. And ASML also doesn't seem to think that the progress built on top of its machines will slow. So, someone said here that I don't like to talk about the end of Moore's Law. I like to talk about the illusion of Moore's Law. So, a lot of people also kind of doubt this a little bit more. So this person here was saying that Moore's 1965 article is actually more focused on the march of innovation than just shrinkage. So while he, expects high NA EUV to keep spurging process in the chip industry for at least the next 10 years, he believes that the shrinking chip features using lithography will become less important. So a lot of people also kind of doubt Moore's Law. And again, I like the idea of Moore's cycle better. I think this cycle, the cycle idea, is just evident throughout everything through life. We have cycles with birth and death. We have cycles in our bodies, right? We have hormones. We have these things that cycle every month, especially if you're a woman, right? We have these cycles as humans. In the planet, we have cycles. The earth spins on an axis every 24 hours. It spins around the sun every 365 days, right? We have these cycles that are pretty set in stone, scheduler, and it would be no surprise to me that this would also happen in computers. Cycles really do run the world in a sense. Even our bodily clocks are a cycle, right? If you go to bed at a certain time, wake up at a certain time, eventually your bodily clock will adjust to that, and you'll naturally do that. So, the things that we have here, these cycles that we have, are really evident in our, kind of, if you want to think about it, day-to-day life, and it's obviously going to be evident in computers. And that's kind of the really big thing I wanted to talk about with Moore's Law today, and I think I'm going to stop it there, because I think those are the main points that I wanted to get across here, and I think those are the main articles that I really got out of it, which I thought all of them were super interesting, to kind of give a real big review over Moore's Law. Really, Moore's Law is that exponential growth of the chips and how they're stopping, and a lot of people are thinking it's stopped now. So I really like to think about it, synthesizing the text, thinking about it in my own words, if you want to use that example. I really want to think about this like a cycle. I want to think that Moore's Law is not necessarily stopping, even if this really is a thing. And I mean, there is evidence that it is a thing in a sense, but I do think it's more of a cycle. I think there are technologies that will start and stop, start and stop, start and stop. There's a reason, right? There's a reason why we don't use flip phones anymore. There's a reason why we don't use home phones anymore, or a rotary phone, or we have huge long landlines. And there's a reason why that we've moved away from cable TV to something like Netflix or Disney Plus or YouTube. There's a reason why all this is going to happen, and there's going to be a reason why we might not use the same phones that we see today, or use the same laptops that we see today. All of these things are going to be wiped out of existence eventually, right? If you were back in before the industrial era and before light bulbs, if you want to go that far back, and thought, everyone's always going to use lanterns to see in the dark, that would be ridiculous, right? So, everything improves as it should improve, right? We're not at a stopping point as a society. As humans, we really haven't been around that long, right? All these innovations are really, again, only at the beginning. And I think I've mentioned this as well in the James Webb Space Telescope episode, right? Like, as well as space exploration. We're really at the frontier of all this stuff, right? Right now, it seems like everything's moving really quick, as it is. But it's really not, in respective to the time frame of humans, or the time frame of really the Earth. All of this stuff is happening as it should. And I think that there is going to be new technologies like the metaverse, if you want to use that example, or like quantum computers. And these things are going to take over, and we might not have the same technology we have today, and that is okay. There's a reason why technologies end. There's a reason why, because these things become less efficient, and there's bigger and better things that can come about. So really, overall, I don't think there's a reason to worry about Moore's Law at all. I think Moore's Law is just a super interesting concept, and I think it's something that, it's just really, it's something interesting that we're going to have to look in the next few years. Personally, I don't think it's ended quite yet, though I might be wrong, as I don't know too much about the intricacies of the chips right now and how they've been developing. But in general, I think, even if it is coming to a slow end, a crash and burn, maybe, or a slow burn, I really don't think that it's anything to worry about. I don't think you should be scared that Moore's Law is ending and that we'll never innovate again in our lives. No, I think that is complete opposite. I think there's so much room for innovation, and there is so much room for new technologies to arise. So, really overall, I think Moore's Law is a super interesting topic. I'm glad you guys have listened to today's episode. Again, really, obviously, I recommend looking at all the resources that I am currently going to link into the description. Just go check out those resources if you want more information. You can look at the Quora little kind of thread that I found. That one was super interesting. Do your own research. Maybe you're listening to this 10 years, 20 years from now, and you have really cool quantum computers, and you're listening to this and you're laughing, saying, oh my gosh, she was totally right, or she was totally wrong. So maybe you're doing that right now, and that'd be really funny if you were doing so. So, I mean, really, I think we all just gotta wait. We gotta see what happens, and I don't think there's anything to worry about Moore's Law. So again, everybody, thank you so much for listening to today's episode. If you ever have any suggestions for future episodes, just DM me wherever you can find me. There's always the information for connections in the bio. So again, to connect, you can follow me on Instagram at the podcast Instagram profile, and it's ever.changingworld. Ever.changingworld is the Instagram. The Instagram again is ever.changingworld. The Twitter is everchangingwor. Again, everchangingwor, and that is the Twitter. And of course, the website is shows.acast.com/ever-changing-world. Again, shows.acast.com/ever-changing-world. So again, thank you so much for listening to today's episode. I hope you enjoyed it. And tune in to next week's episode for a new and exciting topic. Thank you so much for listening, and have a wonderful day.